took flight, a worker's hymn in the morning light. The age of profit crumbled like stone, and care for all became the cornerstone.
Unique New York. Unique New York.
Jorah, how you doing?
Hey, Bob. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing great.
Hello, everybody. This is Jorah Kai, and this is the first of a new series of live interviews with authors, friends of mine, acquaintances, colleagues, and people I highly respect. Today, I'm really excited to be talking to an author that is very intriguing, very interesting, and someone we've been looking forward to doing this for a while. His name is Robert Rivenbark. You might have read his recent novel, which is making lots of waves, called The Cloud. Robert Rivenbark is a novelist, screenwriter, and journalist with extensive experience in sci-fi, cyberpunk, and transhumanist storytelling. After spending nearly a decade in Los Angeles, he's been immersed in Hollywood's entertainment industry with many Asian cultural influences. The Cloud won first place in the science fiction category at San Antonio Writers Guild 27th Annual Writing Contest. I believe that is correct. It is now being adapted by Hollywood to be a major transmedia giant, which is very exciting. I can't wait to pick your brain on that. Robert, you've had an incredible journey from Georgia to LA, now back in Atlanta. Welcome, and can you tell me a little about yourself and what drew you to storytelling?
Yes, thank you, Jorah. I'm certainly honored to be here. And in answer to your question, I guess I've just always been a storyteller. I really discovered that I was in the sixth grade. I had an English and homeroom teacher, Mrs. Lee, who saw that I had potential, as she had me elected program chairman, which is the only grammar school class that I ever held. And I was the cultural czar. So I wrote and produced plays and also wrote and read short stories. And I guess then at the age of 11, I found out I was a storyteller. And I've been doing it ever since in one form or another. And it just, it was natural to me. Some people pick up a pencil or a brush and start drawing or painting because that's the way they're wired. I'm wired to tell stories. And even younger, I was a pretty good storyteller because I had asthma and I lived in a neighborhood where there were 11 boys other than myself and a few girls, and all the boys were older, and I used to get my ass kicked quite a bit, and I learned how to talk my way out of it.
That's a good skill.
Yeah. It's a good skill to have.
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah, I can relate to a lot of that as well myself. I felt quite early. My dream would be to be, I think I was about 11 or 12, maybe around the same age you mentioned. And I thought, if I could sit in the sand with my toes in the beach and a little laptop, and back then having a laptop even seemed way out of reach of a reasonable person, and just typing away words, and that was my job. I thought that was really something. So it's amazing when you listen to your calling and your heart, what can happen over the years. You've lived in LA for many years, and we've talked a little bit before. You're deeply exposed to Asian cultures, particularly Chinese culture and other Asian cultures. How did that influence your writing and worldview and leading up to this big breakthrough with The Cloud?
Well, it had a very profound effect. Before I lived in LA, I'd lived in many different places, and I was an undergraduate student in Germany for a while, and then I won a scholarship to study in Britain for 2 years. So I was in Oxford and London. I got to know people from all over the world there. But it was really when I moved to LA that Asian culture just leapt into life. And it was because I got to know so many people from Asia. LA, which has, I think, 20 million people, has millions and millions of people from China, Korea, Japan, Vietnam, Cambodia, Thailand, India, you name it. And I got to know quite a few people. And one of the people I got to know was a lovely young lady from Taiwan who was kind kind of a polymath. She was a brilliant financial analyst and banker, but she was also a very gifted operatic singer and electric violinist. And I originally shot her. I was doing some still photography and video work, and there was an event called Abundance, which is a Burning Man event that happened every 6 weeks in West LA. And there were always 500 or 600 people, and there would be a series of performers who would come out because the event itself was all night. It would start about 8 o'clock and run till 4:30 in the morning.
I wouldn't know anything about that.
Well, you told me that you've been involved in Burning Man for quite a while, so I'm
a lot of events. In my younger years. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So this lady was performing on her electric violin, and I was doing a still shoot, and I posted a lot of the pictures on Facebook. She saw them, she liked them, and she contacted me and said, I'm going to be performing at the Whiskey A Go-Go in Hollywood next Saturday night. Would you like to come out and shoot me? And I said, well, I'd be honored. So I shot her at the Whiskey A Go-Go. She was able to get me right down next to the stage, so I was shooting up as she was performing. And one thing led to another, and eventually she was recording her first album, and she asked me to be her official videographer to film that event. So I brought out a film crew. I had a lot of film friends, and we used to do a lot of guerrilla filmmaking, and we did an all-night shoot there. And at that point, I began to get interested in her a little beyond just professionally. And so we started to date, and I thought that this might be the love of my life. And unfortunately, the relationship didn't work out. So I was brokenhearted. And when I left LA and went to Atlanta after being in LA for 8.5 years, and I started working for a Fortune 500 commercial real estate company. That's where I got the idea for the novel. And so I was still carrying her in my heart. And what I decided to do as I was working out the storyline was I split her into two characters. So she became the femme fatale and the female protagonist. Mitsuko is the femme fatale. Christina is the female protagonist. So that's how I got the idea to incorporate her into my story.
Yeah, that's a great story. I don't even want to cut you off because I feel like you could just tell a million great stories. It's very interesting to hear about your experiences. I can relate with the late night events and stuff. I used to be a DJ and producer as well, as we've talked about. And you've done a lot of photography. So let's talk about that for a moment then. Do you think that having that background in filming helps you to write cinematically? Like, do you think you're predisposed to thinking about shots and how something would feel as an adaptation?
Well, yes, it was the experience of being a shooter myself, still a photographer and videographer, but also I wrote 16 screenplays when I was in LA. I went to a lot of classes, a lot of events. I remember one particular conference I went to was the keynote speaker was Steve Xylian, the gentleman who won the Oscar for Schindler's List for his screen adaptation. So I read hundreds of books on screenwriting and was writing scripts. Of course, at that particular time, I couldn't get arrested. Nobody was buying my scripts, but I studied a lot about technique. And that in combination with the still shoots and the guerrilla filmmaking I was doing definitely contributed to the way I went at writing my novel, because I thought of it in terms of scenes. And I tried to size each of the chapters in a way that you could easily cut to the next action in a way that was similar to when you cut to a different scene in a film.
Excellent. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's great. And so you mentioned a bit of your influence and some of the pain, and I can relate to that too. Pain making great art, really. We hold those pains and then we transform them. But the novel. I mean, when I read it, I was astounded. I thought I was going to move to Japan for most of my life because when I read William Gibson's Neuromancer as a younger man, it really changed me. And sort of at the last minute, I ended up moving. I had an opportunity to visit China and to spend some time in the cyberpunk Chongqing, which is the largest metropolis in the world that nobody's ever heard of. And they've been doing a lot of work since I moved here about 11 years ago to make it more known on the world stage. And definitely in Asia, at least, it's quite famous now. And they're working on the Western world. It's quite a remarkable city. So I always thought I would be in Japan, and Gibson's work really did shape me as a younger man. So when I read The Cloud, I felt these influences: cyberpunk, transhumanism, some deep philosophical themes. So beyond that initial spark you mentioned, can you talk a little bit about some of those themes and how they shaped the story?
Absolutely, yes. And by the way, it was one of the great experiences of my life when I read William Gibson. I was working at an ad agency in Irvine, California, and the creative director and I got along well. And he said, I want you to read this book. This is the guy that invented the term internet. And I read it and I was blown away because I actually didn't know that particular genre. I'd read a lot of science fiction, but not the William Gibson brand. It was a whole new experience. But there were several things that converged in my mind that helped to gel the story behind The Cloud. First, as I mentioned, I was working for a Fortune 500 commercial real estate company as the senior copywriter and video producer. We had our own little sort of Warner Brothers studio within the company, and we shot dozens and dozens and dozens of videos. So one of the things I learned was that this particular company, which shall remain nameless, was building cities of the future in 80 countries. So as part of my job, in addition to doing the advertising, the promotional videos, I did a series of interviews with a lady named Dr. Andrea Chegut, Chegut. She is the chair of the Real Estate Innovation Lab at MIT. She had 8 doctoral students who were all writing dissertations, and they were all inventing technologies of the future. And I'm talking about light years beyond self-driving cars and things of that nature. I'm talking about things like robotic skyscrapers on treads that you can roll aside when you want to change your cityscape. Those were the kind of things they were doing. So
Wow.
It got me very interested in what's coming in the future. And it didn't sit well for me that in these 80 countries that the company was building cities of the future, those cities were planned as gated communities for the top 10% only. And the idea is the other 90% of the population, would get to live in ghettos. That didn't sit well with me. So I started reading a lot of futurist books because I was looking for hope. And I happened to read an absolutely stunning book called Homo Deus by Yuval
Noah
Harari.
Yeah.
Yes, that name is a mouthful, but you pronounced it correctly. Anyway,
he's got a lot to say. Yeah, he's a wonderful writer.
Oh my God, he's incredible. I've read all of his books now, but that particular one, Homo Deus, was his tome predicting what the 21st century is probably going to look like from his point of view. And he is an Oxford-trained historian, originally from Israel. I think he's back in Israel now.
He's professor there, I think. Yeah,
exactly. Those are his roots, and his family is there. But he was predicting what he could see would be the logical outcome with the biotechnical revolution, artificial, organs of all kinds, uh, modifying the human genome to give people longer lives, AI, virtual reality, all of these things. And he claimed in that book, and I can't substantiate this, so please don't sue me, that the two founders of Google have been investing tens of millions of dollars into research so that they can attain personal immortality in this world for themselves. It would be incredibly expensive were they able to do it. They're not quite there yet, but they're trying to get there. But assuming that it's actually a cornucopia of technologies that would be required to keep someone alive and in good health forever, but it would be available only to the top 1%. So he said the great quest of the top 1% in the 21st century is to reach that goal, personal immortality. Well, that blew my mind. And so it was a combination of my experiences in LA, living a very neo-noirish kind of existence, because I was there during the Great Recession and I was living in a very marginal neighborhood in Long Beach. Really kind of miraculous that I survived all of that. A lot of, problems with finding steady work and, just dealing with all of the trials and tribulations of living in a really bad neighborhood. So that, in combination with working for the Fortune 500 commercial real estate company, the work that I was researching and also the books I was reading about futurism just gelled the story. And I decided, okay, what is the future going to look like given all of these tendencies that are happening now? Oh, another thing I should mention is, while I worked at this company, they sent us out to Las Vegas for the Adobe Max show. For those who are not in advertising or in film industry, Adobe makes all of the software that is used for video editing. Except, of course, now you can do video editing with an iPhone. But for decades, they were the ones that, they did all of the graphic software, Photoshop, Illustrator, et cetera, et cetera. So when we were out there, they had an IMAX size theater with an enormous screen. They had us all in there. They were showing us all of the great, cool Adobe software that's going to be coming out. And then they brought a guy out in a VR helmet, and they projected what he was seeing on this huge IMAX screen. And it was really impressive. I mean, it was like you were there. It looked very real. And that's what the experience was like wearing the VR helmet. But they said, but in 15 to 20 years, you're not going to need a helmet because we will have total immersion VR. There will be no more two-dimensional movies. You will be inside the movie, or you will be inside the TV series. It'll be happening all around you. And so I took that and the other things I've mentioned, and I just kind of ran wild with it and created a future world, which is we split down to two power blocks. One called the Cloud was ruled from Hong Kong. The folks in Hong Kong used their financial wizardry to gradually undermine the Beijing regime and get them in debt and eventually take over. And then they took the surveillance technology that was available in the 21st century and applied it to a global empire. So they control all of Asia, the Pacific, Australia, and all of North and South America. So the story is set in L.A. The protagonist, Blaise Pascal VII, is a former special forces officer with a really tough family background. He has PTSD, but he used that to develop his own storytelling ability, and he became the best virtual reality programmer for Mythoplex, which is the company that produces all of the total immersion VR movies and series. Mythoplex is in LA. Many years ago, they knocked down the Hollywood sign, and Mythoplex is what you see on the skyline in this future LA. So he is recruited by his boss, Min Xing, a Chinese former military commander, to approach Blaise and offer him eternal life and a huge salary bump and a bigger office in exchange for
quite
him.
A package.
Yeah, quite a package. In exchange for coding a very subtle drug, a VR delivered drug, in his latest VR series. Now, this drug would essentially seduce people into wanting to experience it because it's an overwhelmingly ecstatic experience. It's like heroin on steroids. And everyone in this future society has what's called a K-spot over their third eye. That allows the cloud to deliver 24-hour total immersion VR entertainment, but it also allows for AI monitored 24-hour surveillance. So the cloud can read everyone's brainwaves, and if there are any traitorous brainwave patterns that crop up, the cloud sends a VR delivered assassin called the Mantis, which is a giant praying mantis. And basically, the Mantis fries people's brains, and that's how they keep people, in the fold, so to speak. They are also able to deliver 24/7 neural propaganda. And so they've really got a lockdown on this society. Now, what Blaise doesn't know when Min Xing offers him this opportunity to be promoted and also to attain eternal life is that this drug he's creating has been designed to annihilate the entire underclass called the Slags, who live in southwest LA, sort of what in our century would be the domain of the Crips and the Bloods, etc. And he doesn't realize this. He thinks they're just going to use it to basically dope up the underclass. But what happens is he meets a very attractive young Chinese woman, Christina, who seduces him, and turns out she's part of an underground revolution of hackers, some of whom formerly worked for Mythoplex, and they recruit Blaise to attempt to insert a worm in his video game that would be able to essentially reach out and fry all of the cloud servers all over the world if he can get past all of the AI firewalls that the regime has in place. So he's put in a moral quandary because Minxing sends his seductive daughter Mitsuko to seduce Blaze to make sure that Blaze stays within the fold, delivers on this drug, which is called anima. And he's sorely tempted. She's a beautiful woman, and she explains to him, we'll be able to experience pleasure in ways that you've never imagined, and we'll have thousands of centuries to enjoy it with each other or separately. And who wouldn't be tempted by the offer of eternal life? How many of us would say no to that if we knew it was real and the biotech and medical device technology was there? But on the other hand, he also knows this is a horrendous attempt to commit genocide against the underclass, which is orders of magnitude beyond what the Nazis were able to achieve during the Holocaust. So I don't want to give too many spoilers, but that's basically the premise of the book. And
I mean that's absolutely great, and maybe that's a great place to pivot then, because it's really fascinating. I really enjoyed it. It feels in many ways like a spiritual successor to maybe Neuromancer, with the technology reaching forward with this decades of extra perspective we've had since William wrote that. With a bit of maybe 1984. And I think it's very relevant, right? That sort of compromise we give. We get convenience for compromise in some ways, kind of, don't we, with all this technology? I was recently talking with a friend of mine who was in China last year for the World Sci-Fi Fair in Chengdu. The two big guests for that were Liu Cixin, Three Body Problem, which is a big Netflix show right now, of course, and published a book in China originally with one of the companies. I'm publishing my amazing book, the Chinese version, which is very exciting. But the other guest was Robert J. Sawyer from Canada, who's won a lot of major awards for science fiction, Hugo, Nebula, Robert Heinlein, and all that. And when we talk, it's interesting. So maybe for a minute before we pivot, I'm really interested to talk about your adaptation journey. But I am quite optimistic. I've always been sort of optimistic. Elon is quite a polarizing figure these days. But even 5 or 6 years ago, when he mentioned we were all androids already, we're all cyborgs with our smartphones, we just want to take it a few steps farther, there's definitely a seductive appeal in the longevity game, transhumanism, the idea that when I lose my train of thought, I could have a little co-pilot friend built in that would tell me what I'm about to say and enhance, this the idea of enhancing yourself to, live for many, many years with altered carbon. It could be hundreds of years in different bodies. All of these ideas are very seductive. And the downside, of course, is always there. Security, if you could have your mind intact from Alzheimer's or dementia, well, someone could hack it on the other side. Someone could be. I was talking with my father, who was just visiting from Canada. He's just arrived back in Toronto, actually, about an hour ago. And with, on the plus side, of course, if someone was paralyzed and you could run a fiber optic cable down their spine and have them walking around again, who wouldn't want that? What a dream. And then the other side, if someone could hack into them and then make them an assassin, there's a plus and downside there. So Robert is always quite skeptical of what we're doing with Robert Sawyer with AI, and he's sort of really a sharp critic of it. Whereas I see that, but I also kind of, maybe I'm so disenchanted with some of the things they are today. I think, how could AI government be any worse, really? I kind of make the other argument that I grew up as a kind of a goth boy, and I've been enchanted with sort of the solar punk movement. It's almost like a rainbow or a green sheep inside the raven's clothing. Chongqing is a very cyberpunk city. It's very dystopian in some ways. I mean, it looks beautiful by night. We have this wonderful night view. A lot of Chinese modern cities do. But also we have this like kind of solar punk side where we have these kind of sponge city projects to handle floods and more green spaces. As much as we burn a lot of coal in China to produce the world's goods, we also have the most solar power. I think we produce more than all of Europe together. So there is a cyberpunk and a solar punk side of my Chinese super city that I am a journalist and teacher in. So I kind of see both sides in a way that contrasts with Robert J. Sawyer. And I'm kind of wondering, would you want to talk about that for a minute? How do you
Sure.
feel about both of those sides?
Yes, I think about this a lot. I've read quite a bit, discussed it with a lot of folks whose opinions I respect. I think it's a double-edged sword. The great theologian Reinhold Niebuhr once said that for every major breakthrough in technology, there's a concomitant potential for a new kind of evil. And one of the books that I'm reading now is called The Coming Wave by Mustafa Suleyman. He was the co-founder of the world's first AI company in London. He then worked for Google for 8 years, and now he has co-founded a second AI company. And he walks us through what's going to be happening over the next 10 years. What he says is, in 2034, we're going to live in a totally automated world run by AI. And he said, what people tend not to understand is that every time there is a new generation of AI created, where it imbibes all human knowledge, everything in every library in the world, everything that's on the internet, and it imbibes it not in human words, but in 3-bit chunks of information. So what's happening is that AI is developing an utterly non-human intelligence, which will be perfected in about 5 years. He said, if we don't put the guardrails in place now to teach AI to have some moral constraints and respect for human beings, we don't know what AI will conclude about its human creators. Might decide that we're dispensable. And the next thing we know, AI generates a world of tsunamis, earthquakes, and other natural disasters, plagues and whatnot, and just wipes human beings off the map. Or if we're wise in the way we deploy AI now, we can avoid some of that. What isn't going to change is human nature. I mean, let's face it, human beings are capable of stupendous achievements and can be such a force for good. But at the same time, we always seem to make the wrong choices, even when we know we're going to. My favorite writer of all time is Dostoevsky. And his book, Notes from the Underground, is one that I go back and read every 3 or 4 years just to remind myself. And he makes the case in there that no matter what kind of utopia or dystopia humanity creates, someone is going to stand up and say no to it, because that is how the human spirit is constituted. Human beings are not constituted to be mindless slaves. And so I applied that thought to my own work. I feel like there are going to be abuses, and we are going to make mistakes with AI if we're not careful. But like you, I have faith that the human spirit will rebel against that. And that's the dramatic choice I made for my novel. And I'm also applying that in the 2 sequels that I'm writing. So I hope that clarifies how I feel about it.
Sure. I mean, I think it's a hell of a coin flip, but I'm always optimistic. And living in China gives me a different perspective, I think, than if I had just stayed in Canada all these years. So I'm kind of open-minded to these sort of changes. So speaking, maybe that's a good place to pivot, of these 2 other books. So I've heard, and you've told me a little bit, you've been working with Ken Atchity, to develop the cloud into a feature film or transmedia empire kind of offering. Can you tell me a little about that? Because I think for many writers, I mean, there's just, let me run with that for a second. I think for a lot of independent writers or indie writers or younger people just getting started, they might be really interested in hearing about this process. There's just so many hurdles. When I teach, I kind of tell my students, I use Hemingway or Hunter Thompson as a good example of respect for the craft, and then practice makes perfect, and the first draft of everything is shit, and keep going and all that. But then once an author finishes a novel, publishing is a huge hurdle. Marketing, once they get published, is a huge hurdle. And then this sort of the green pastures, or the idea that you could get adapted, and it takes on new life, whether that's a TV series or a movie, graphic novels, all this kind of stuff. But for the average kind of quiet writer at home, that feels very far away. And maybe living in LA had you rubbing shoulders or meeting people in restaurants and stuff, that gives you, it felt more real to you or more accessible. But I mean, I'd love to just sort of hear about that process. I think a lot of people
Oh,
would find it.
absolutely. I'm happy to share that, and I encourage all young writers to be bold and adventurous, fair forward voyagers, as T.S. Eliot wrote in Four Quartets. So my journey was this. I wrote the novel. I worked with a wonderful book editor, Elizabeth Lyon, whom I've known for more than 20 years. She edited the novel. She said, "You've really got something here. Start submitting it to every literary contest you can." That's how I happened to enter and win the San Antonio Writers Guild annual competition. And then she advised me to get Jeff Herman's annual guide to publishers, editors, and agents. And she said, start querying 20 literary agents at a time. If you don't hear back within, say, 3 weeks, query 20 more. And wait another 2 to 3 weeks, query 20 more. You'll be able to see in Jeff Herman's guide which ones are looking for your kind of novel, the ones that publish in your genre. So I sent out 20 queries, and the first day I got an email from Ken Atchity. He said, "Hi, I read your pitch. I like the sound of it. Could you send me the whole novel as a PDF? Don't send me sample chapters. I would like to read the whole book." So I did send it to him. I didn't think anything would come of it. 3 weeks later, he called me and said, "Hi, this is Ken Atchity. You may recall I asked for your novel. I want to sign you to an exclusive contract. I think you've got the next Matrix trilogy here. And I am a Hollywood literary manager." I should give this aside. The difference between a Hollywood literary manager and a Hollywood literary agent is the literary agent, and they're the ones that these monster agencies like CAA, there are 5 of those that pretty much handle 90% of the talent in Hollywood. Those folks are, and I've met a good many of them. I used to go to the LA Lakers games with a buddy of mine who was an actor, and he knew all of the agents at ICM, which is another one of the big agencies. So I met all of those folks. They're like car salesmen who have a Maserati in the showroom, and they want to get that Maserati out of the showroom today. And they're not thinking any further than getting the Maserati out of the showroom today. You, as the screenwriter, are the low person on the totem pole. The A-list actor and the director are top of the charts. So if the Hollywood agent can package you with, say, Martin Scorsese and I don't know, pick any Matt Damon, your screenplay, they will shaft you at the first opportunity, because the serious money they're going to make is from Matt Damon and Martin Scorsese. It's the director and the actors, and obviously the cinematographer if you're one of the top 10 cinematographers. So they're not thinking long term. They're seeing you as a means to an end. They're seeing you, the screenwriter, as a means to bringing in an A-list actor and an A-list director.
Mhm.
And they're going to make the serious money. You know, the actor is going to get $20 million if you're, you know, Tom Cruise or somebody like that. The director is going to get probably, you know, 3 to 5 million. As a screenwriter, you're going to get 150K, and they're going to try to get you out of the picture. In other words, there's not going to be any like you get to go on set, you get to shadow the director, you get to rewrite the dialogue. No, they want you out of the picture. A literary manager, on the other hand, takes a much longer term view of your career, and that's what Ken Atchity does. The literary manager is thinking 15 years down the road. He's thinking, or she, all right, Bob Rivenbark, I see that he could go here, 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 and here. So what do I need to do to get him to the 5-year goal, 10-year goal, 15-year goal? He's going to make that long-term commitment because he knows if he sticks by you, if he believes in you, then he's going to make a hell of a lot more money than if he takes the attitude of the Hollywood agent. And those people are ruthless, and they discard screenwriters left and right. And for that matter, they discard other kinds of talent as well. So one of the first things Ken told me once he signed me is, you are going to turn this into a trilogy, yes? I said, well, I don't know. I haven't thought about that. Do you think I should? He says, yes, I do. Because if you turn The Cloud into a trilogy, we have got a franchise, and it could be as Star Wars. It could be that big. We could be making movies and series for the rest of our lives. So now that you've got the novel in the can, so to speak, and I've gotten it published for you, get busy on that trilogy.
Mhm.
And I said, well, gosh, Ken, I don't know how I would go about it. He says, okay, good. Then you and I are going to spend the next 5 months working together. You're going to read my book, A Writer's Time, pay special attention to the first 5 chapters. That is going to teach you how to write character arcs for all your major characters. And you're going to take the characters from the first novel, you're going to add whoever is going to be in the second novel that wasn't in the first, and you're going to do a complete character arc, and it's going to appear on 3x5 index cards. And you're going to tell me that each character's character arc in 3 sentences that can be included on one side of a 3x5 index card. What is the character's original state? What is the challenge they face that they have to overcome? And how have they changed after they have overcome that challenge? It sounds simple, but it took me 5 months to write the cards. And I went through about 25 passes on that. Ken was saying, nope, too long, not focused enough. You're not selling me on this character. But I finally got there. And then I sat down and outlined novels 2 and 3. That took me, quite honestly, took me over a year because I had a lot of false starts. I wasn't sure where I was going. And basically, I just had to massage it. And I had to overcome writer's block because I was terrified. I thought, okay, I did this. I'm probably a one-trick pony. I did a pretty good job on the first novel, but I'll never pull off 2 more. And I had to overcome that because that's just nonsense. Writer's block is just a form of neurosis that you have to overcome. You have to give yourself permission to succeed. So Ken told me after we had worked together, I'd say 4 years, maybe 5, He said, I'm gonna let you in on a little trade secret. I participate in a film fund with a gentleman named Howard R. Schuster. You don't know him, right? I said, no, I don't believe I do. He says, no, because Howard likes to stay in the background. But Howard R. Schuster has funded more than 300 films, meaning he's come up with the entire budget or 90% of the budget, or in some cases 70 or 80% of the budget. And he has funded films such as James Cameron's Avatar, James Mangold's Ford versus Ferrari, Bohemian Rhapsody. I mean, if you go to the IMDb page and look up Howard R. Schuster, you'll see his 75 most recent films. So what Ken revealed to me is, okay, I pitched Howard on the cloud. He loves it. He thinks this could be a summer sci-fi blockbuster. He has 50 films in the pipeline that he has already secured commitments from investors that he's worked with for as long as 4 decades. And they've all committed to all 50 of these films, and they're prepared to commit to the cloud as well. The only thing they're not willing to do up front is to pay for a teaser. Now, we need a 3-minute teaser, which, Bob, you can script, but you're going to have to figure out a way to finance it, because we need to hire a A-list director. We need serious CGI, and we need to attach an A-list actor who will commit to appearing in the teaser, and whom we can also attach to play the male lead in the feature film. So I started working with a dear friend of mine here in Atlanta, Bob Littell, the best connected human being on earth. He practices what's called net weaving, which is the pay it forward principle applied to business. He read and fell in love with the cloud. He said, this is 1984 for the 21st century. So we went through several rounds of venture capitalists. We struck out once. We had some producers that we met with personally on a American tour. They were from Saudi Arabia. They didn't pan out. He introduced me to another producer who's in LA. That didn't pan out. He introduced me to a third venture capitalist. 3 times is a charm. So this gentleman, whose name is Brian Henson, no relation to the Muppet Henson, fell in love with the novel. And he said, okay, I'm a venture capitalist in several areas. One of the things that I'm passionate about is filmmaking, and I have just financed a film that's shooting in Valdosta, Georgia right now, and we have 4 A-list actors attached. So I would like to raise the budget so that we can shoot the teaser that Ken Atchity needs. Ken would use that teaser as his calling card to take the project to every major studio in Hollywood that's looking for a new summer sci-fi blockbuster. And he said, Brian, I'm talking about the venture capitalist, said, but we don't need $1 million to $1.5 million. I work with the University of North Texas Media Department. They are producing teasers like the one that you need for the cloud for about 1/10 of the cost of, just shooting everything live, like hiring an A-list director, shooting it in Vancouver, Georgia and Vancouver, New Orleans. They give very generous production rebates. You spend $30 million, you're going to get $3 million, or you're going to get 10% of that back. Yeah, $3 million for shooting there. But he says what they are doing at University of North Texas is they're using AI, CGI, and they're putting A-list actors in front of green screens and putting them through their paces with scripted material, rather like the way James Cameron shot the Avatar movies. So the production quality is, because of the AI and CGI combo and the actor in front of the green screen, the production quality is just as good as what would normally cost you $1 million to $1.5 million. They can do it for 1/10 of that. So at the moment, Ethan, this gentleman, I don't know if he's the chair, but he's part of the University of North Texas Media Department, is preparing 15 seconds of footage based on my, I put together a what's called a pitch book, and that's about a 32-page brochure. It's all on PDF, where you have your pitch for the story. You have detailed character descriptions for each of the major characters. You have the storyline spelled out very, completely. And you have what are called mood board pages. So you have a page with, like, say, 6 similar films. In my pitch book, we had 1984, The Man in the High Castle, Blade Runner 2049, The Matrix, etc. Those kind of films. And then there were about 8 pages of what are called mood board photos, where we just took stills from similar science fiction films, and it gave you the flavor of it. I also wrote a 10-page script to guide them, and so Ethan is putting together 15 seconds of footage, which is going to be pretty spectacular. I will then take that to Ken Atchity, and if Ken is satisfied with the production quality, we're off to the races, because then Brian has already got commitments from investors he works with, who are willing to raise the cost of producing this through the University of North Texas. Ken, of course, would be the executive producer. Ken would cast the A-list actor. So, we've rolled through. I'm not going to mention any names now. That would be very improper to mention it. But there's some serious talents out there that we think we could get if they're available. And of course, we're honoring the writer's strike and the actor's strike of 2023. We're not going to steal anybody's image and use it without their permission. We're going to go to their agent. We're going to find out if they're available. We're going to hire them. They will then be the actor in front of the green screen. And then we would also attach them to the feature film. So that's the journey I was on. Now, I can't guarantee this same journey could be duplicated. I was very fortunate in that the Hollywood power player I connected with is Ken Atchity. Ken Atchity was a producer on both of the Meg films starring Jason Statham. The Meg 2 was the 13th highest grossing American film in 2023. It was right up there with Oppenheimer and Barbie. And he's done phenomenal things. He's published 30 New York Times bestselling authors. His publishing company, which has been around about 10 years, Story Merchant Books, has published about 300 novels, and they roll out about 8 new novels a month. And he's also just recently founded a new company where he's hired an Amazon guru who, for a fee, you can bring him in, and he will guarantee to turn your novel into an Amazon bestseller, meaning it's selling like hotcakes, and you're getting major media coverage, et cetera, et cetera. So Ken just has he was a college professor for 20 years, Occidental College in LA. He has a PhD in the classics from Princeton. He wrote his dissertation on the Odyssey. He can read classical Greek and Latin. But after we retired from teaching, he decided, I'm going to publish new novelists and I'm going to turn them into movies and series. And his colleagues said, are you crazy? Why aren't you just going to play golf? You got your retirement. And he says, okay, I'm going to be crazy. And a year later, he got his first producer's gig. He produced 16 Hallmark Hall of Fame romantic films back to back. They were all shot in Canada, and he executive produced all 16 of them. And he had no film school training, anything like that. He just had a will, and he also has a brilliant Renaissance kind of mentality and absolute confidence in himself. So over the years, yeah, he's done some amazing things. I'll give you another example. Back in 2003, I believe it was, he was executive producer on a romantic comedy called Life or something like it. And there was a rising young actress named Angelina Jolie. I believe it was her third film. But that film made her a superstar. And Kim got her cast. And, so that's like he reads, I don't know, he probably reads 25 or 30 new novels every month. It's his favorite thing to do is he gets up at 4:30 in the morning. He works till like 9 o'clock every night. His wife, Kayoko, is from Tokyo, takes care of him, makes sure he stays on a healthy diet, exercises, etc. But he's running 6 entertainment companies at this point. And I mean, he's hands-on as a CEO with all 6 of those. And sharp as a tack. And I just feel deeply honored that I'm one of the 30 authors that he has committed the next, 10 to 15 years to try to make us all a success.
It's an amazing story. And, there's so much you've said that I wanted to touch on and come back to and all of that. But I didn't want to interrupt you because I could just feel these incredible stories and insights flowing from you. I feel like we could talk for 10 hours probably and it wouldn't dry up the well. But some of those things, just to reiterate, I think was really interesting. You mentioned how your journey, as much as maybe a young writer might be watching this and hoping to take notes and get something out of that. Yeah, maybe, each journey is not replicable. Like I think, I fell into some really interesting opportunities myself, but just because I did it, it may not be replicable. But I think there are some general principles, maybe to both of our journeys, that a young person may find very helpful, So maybe let me recap those for a moment, and then I'll pitch you another question. From what I got out of that, and what resonates with me is, of course, what happens to even some major talents is, after a first novel breakthrough, there's that second novel question, imposter syndrome. Can I repeat it? And you got to give yourself permission to write. One of my I'll just say it. When I was younger, Patrick Rothfuss with this transformative Name of the Wind fantasy book, and every word, we spent 10 years polishing that one, a lyrical masterpiece in many ways. And then the second book came out 10 years later, and he's actually had a lot of backlash. The more engaged he gets with social media, people will tell you got to go promote your stuff, go on streams, play. He's a fantasy guy, so he plays Dungeons and Dragons with some famous people, to get his stuff out there. I mean, he just enjoys it. But there's this backlash because the third book isn't out. Every time he pops his head out of a hole, someone wants to whack him down and say, get your next book done. But I've heard with him, there's some, I don't know, just put it mildly, some mental health, crisis. People wonder, is it good enough? Can I repeat it? Can I wrap a trilogy? And you might find that too when you get to your third book. You got all the loose ends to tie into pretty bows. And I think you're really onto something with this idea to give yourself permission to do it. Anyone could get inside their head and get totally messed up about it. And you just got to do it. I have a creative partner, Garrett in Chengdu, and he coaches a lot of people. I met him when he was looking for someone to help him teach what he called a Hemingway course, which was part of the journey that eventually got me to write my latest novel, which is my second fiction The Sun Also Rises on Cthulhu. I started with rewriting Old Man and the Sea, and then realized that wouldn't be public domain for another 10 years or so. And I looked at what was, and Sun Also Rises came up in 2022. I think I probably started in about 2020, and I thought if I get it out 2025, it'll be about a century after, and wouldn't that be nice? But with Garrett, when we mentor these writers in China, some of them Chinese and some of them foreigners, and I look at their writing samples, some of them are just amazing, culturally, really profound, and to me interesting things, and I could take such joy in trying to help them find their voice and get that out there. But I always kind of have this like dual hat mentality. And I said, writing is magic. You're creating. You're bringing something from ether. You're filling a blank page with contents and words. You're creating something out of nothing, and to have this profound respect for the magic of it. And on the other hand, it's not magic. It's just mechanics. It's grease. It's sweat. It's blood. Hemingway, what did he say? Writing is easy. You just put one word in front of the other until you bleed. And my students like that first part. Oh, it's easy. Just
great.
One word in front of the other. And then when I get to when you bleed, they realize, oh, this is going to hurt a little bit. But you got to show up. You got to sit at your desk. You have to put in the time, the work, the commitment, treat it like a pro and put in that time. And when you do that, you allow things to happen. You meet people on similar journeys. Meeting Atchity for you sounds like one of those legendary relationships, like Maxwell Perkins, maybe the editor of Hemingway, that helped Hemingway bring out his best self. And I think that's also really inspiring and also aspirational, because in this world, like you mentioned, so many of those cats that just want to get the Maserati out, they're not going to have that kind of long-term vision or loyalty. And to know that there are still some people who believe in the traditional craft and long-term relationships and real quality and untapped potential is really wonderful, I think, because that's what brings out the best. I don't think Hemingway would have been Hemingway without his editor, and you might not be the you'll become without Atchity, and that's really interesting.
Yeah, there's no question about it. I mean, when I went to Ken, I had the first draft edited by Elizabeth Lyon, my book editor. And Ken said, okay, now we're going to get to work. You're going to do some more editing, and you can whine and you can complain all you want to. But my advice to you is keep your mouth shut, do what I tell you, and you're going to have a bestseller here. So I did. And, it was a tough learning curve, because I had been writing screenplays. I had written 16 unsold screenplays. And so doing a novel was, it was an adjustment. But Ken got me through it. Now, Ken does not suffer fools gladly, and he is absolutely ruthless. I felt the entire time I was editing the book under his mentorship that he was like my dissertation advisor, because, in fact, he had been a dissertation advisor for 20 years at Occidental College in LA. So it was tough. He has no mercy. And you just have to have a tough hide. But if you're lucky enough to find someone like Ken, who is in many respects a modern day Maxwell Perkins, you're going to reach potentials that you couldn't reach otherwise, because even the great Hemingway needed an editor. We don't like to admit that. We think that, Hemingway, Faulkner, F. Scott Fitzgerald, they just cranked it out. No, they didn't. They all needed, and by the way, Maxwell Perkins was editor for all of them. One of the fringe benefits of being relentless with your talent and your drive and your storytelling instincts, being able to endure all the rejection you have to go through, the agonies of composition, all of the kind of, bad reviews, things of that kind. One of the benefits is that when you reach a certain level of mastery, you begin to attract other talented people, and unexpected things can happen. Now, what happened to me mid-year 2024 was Bob Littell, my friend who helped me find my venture capitalist, Brian Henson, also introduced me to an incredibly brilliant Renaissance man named Christopher Wynn. He's a Gen Z. He read my novel, fell in love with it. You know, he grew up on science fiction, and he's also a gaming enthusiast. And he approached me and said, would you consider turning the cloud into a video game? Because I got to be honest with you, I think it could be a major player in that arena. And at first, I was just kind of nonplussed because I had not played video games in many, many years because I've been basically a workaholic writer who very rarely takes a day off. And if I am spending leisure time when I'm not reading, I'm usually watching films and series because I like to stay on top of what's new, different, and exciting. But as I got to know Christopher better, I began to see the potential because he was using the cloud as inspiration to leap off into basically a game and a game within a game that is inspired by the novel but doesn't follow it slavishly, that turns this novel story into a competitive gaming, you know, that would make it a really, really interesting video game. So he and I have been collaborating since last October, and he has written an 18-page prospectus describing how the game will play out, and I think it's just breathtaking. He also happens to know the companies that produce video games, and there are two types. There are the big studio type production companies that are connected to Hollywood studios, and you've got to be a major player before they'll even give you the time of day. But then there are a number of indie video game production companies. He has one in mind for us to start with. And we just had a Zoom this week with Ken Atchity to pitch him on the idea. And Ken said, yeah, we can definitely make this part of the package with the feature film. So Ken is now reading the prospectus, and we're going to have another Zoom next Wednesday. And we're going to make this video game happen. And the way we're going to position this is I'm not in a position to be out of pocket to pay a group of developers to do it. So we're going to use Ken's leverage to go to them and make the pitch and say, look, we're going to let you in on this now. It's in development as a feature film, but after the feature film, we're not going to give you the time of day. You're not going to get anywhere close to us because we're going to have a blockbuster film. So now is when you need to commit to this. And you folks can go out and recruit some young gun developers, you know, some 20-somethings that are living in mom's basement and eating a lot of ramen noodles, and sell them on the idea of, we want to bring you in, but we're going to give you back-end profits, which is what happens in the movie industry quite a bit. And so Christopher knows how to make the pitch because he's been a major gamer since he was, 5 or 6 years old. Ken can bring all of the tonnage of his long, nearly 4 decades of producing films and his partnership with Howard R. Schuster to the table. And so we'll get that concept sold. So we're going to end up with a novel, which I think sales are going to do extremely well once the film comes out, even better than they are now. We're going to have the video game, and I'm going to be free to focus and put all the spit and polish on the trilogy. And so that's my journey. I as you said, I mean, you can't guarantee that it can be repeated. One thing I think is a universal. It's always a good idea to hook up with a good independent book editor, because your first draft is going to be a mess. In fact, my book editor told me, just let yourself write a shitty first draft. It's going to be shitty anyway, but don't try to write a masterpiece out of the box. Work with me and I'll help you whip it into shape. And in fact, when I submitted it to Ken Atchity, one of the first things he asked me is, did you work with a professional book editor when you were writing this? I said, yeah, Elizabeth Lyon. He says, well, you can certainly tell, because you wouldn't believe some of the crap that's crossed my desk. So starting with a good book editor is a terrific idea.
Mhm.
There are thousands of books on writing. There's some terrific books on screenwriting I can recommend. But if you're writing a novel, I think a good place to start would be Ken Atchity's A Writer's Time. You can get it on Amazon, and the whole book is brilliant. But those first 5 chapters are particularly crucial to help a writer who's struggling with a nebulous idea, like, I've got this feeling. I think I've got this great story, but I'm not quite sure how to pull it together. The first 5 chapters of that book will help you to gel the idea, help you, get your character arcs for all your major characters, help you to outline it so that you're clear in your mind. And when you actually sit down to start writing and filling in those words on a blank page and bleeding, you're going to be doing it with a level of insight that you wouldn't have otherwise.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Let me recap a little bit of that too, and then we've definitely hit our hour. Maybe it feels like we can have more of these if you're into it. I love
Oh,
it.
definitely.
Keep on going. So a couple of those things. So your journey is very interesting for me personally, and I think for a young writer looking to, for me, for many years, like I took a degree in English literature and creative writing, and I studied master classes. James Patterson, Orkin for his dialogue. All these great people that offer master classes online, and studied at many places. Film Courage was a great YouTube channel for me as a novelist, just to think about all these tips that screenwriters have. But it was kind of my moment. It was a little bit, I call it my Hemingway, the snows of my Hemingway and Kilimanjaro kind of moment, where it was 2020 and I was in China, and all of a sudden I heard some whispers from some friends of mine. A virus is going around, all this stuff. And literally just almost overnight, within a couple of days, it escalated. There was lockdowns in Wuhan, which is the major city, 800 kilometers from Chongqing, the next biggest super city close to me. And all these people were saying, whatever's going on there was going to be happening in Chongqing within a matter of days. And I kind of had this moment of panic where I thought, like, I've got these unwritten, like unread, unpublished. I had a folder of these different books I'd written in first or second drafts that weren't published. I had taken 30 years of writing classes. I probably read almost every craft book there was, except I haven't read this Atchity one. So I'll put that on my list. It sounds wonderful. But for all of that study I've done, and I was an avid reader from a young child to reading hundreds of books in fantasy and sci-fi and all of that. So I had done all the things you're supposed to do. But where was my library if this virus took me out in the next month or so? I thought, what a wasted life almost. I felt this kind of panic. And so I started writing just about my journey and the COVID thing. And that became this kind of diary. I called it The Invisible War. It was published as Kai's Diary in China, which is maybe a little bit less of an incisive title. It became a Chinese bestseller in China. They called it a top 10 book of the year in China, which was a remarkable journey. I ended up doing a second book, and I did a tour. I was kind of on media as like this sort of COVID guru, both in China and in the West. I ended up doing a gig with my childhood hero. I loved kung fu movies growing up. I did a thing with Jean-Claude Van Damme. It was just so bizarre, really bizarre. It turned into a trilogy, almost a philosophical nonfiction trilogy. And then I just got so tired of writing about a virus and deaths and policies. And I wrote Amos the Amazing as a way for my friends to tell a children's story and a positive view of China, because I had so much blowback. I told people to wash their hands and wear a mask, and they challenged me on every element of anti-Chinese propaganda coming out of the West. And I just wanted to write a nice little story for parents to read their kids. and that started my next journey. But for me, it was this kind of idea that you got to take it seriously, you have to be professional. And I just tried to take that first book deal and recreate the urgency and work I put into that, and thought, well, if I can do it that once, I can do it again, and I can do it again, and I'll just try to keep doing it. And I have this, I had the flash of my own mortality, and I thought, well, if I can just put a book in the can every year or two or three, or have a few on the go, when I'm ready to go, I want to have a big library for people younger than me, hopefully enjoy the way that I enjoyed books by authors when I was a child. So to jump back to your journey for a minute again, yeah, I think that's wonderful. The idea of your proof of concept video. I had some friends when I went to Dalhousie. I went to college in Halifax, Nova Scotia. There were some funny guys out in the sticks. They did a little program called Trailer Park Boys, and we would see them at the bars on the weekend. Funny characters, Ricky and Bubbles, and one of the ADs was dating a good friend of mine, Rob Cotterill, his friend Jason Eisner. They put something together when Tarantino and Rodriguez did Grindhouse. They were looking for some fake movies to stitch them together. Werewolf Nuns from Mars or something. And they did a little thing. They got an A-lister, a former A-lister. You mentioned Blade Runner, Rutger Hauer, who was one of the big replicants from the original '84 Harrison Ford Blade Runner. And he did the kind of just fun 90-second or 2-minute fake hobo with a shotgun. And then there was just enough hype about it, and people really liked it. And then they ended up developing that into a full feature-length movie that did quite well. So I think you're really into something with that journey. It looks like you got all the pieces going. Once you get that proof of concept, I'm sure things take time. You got to be patient, right? You got to keep moving forward. But I fully expect to see a lot come out of that. And it's all very, very interesting. It's very, very interesting. Let me ask you one more question, and then we'll try to keep it to about an hour. I promise let's do it again soon. But so for me, watching Film Courage is one of the big channels I really like. And I've heard about some producers and some writers will tell me they spent 10 or 20 years rewriting a screenplay, a million times, had it bought and returned, and different directors attached and asking for hundreds of rewrites, essentially. So it was almost like a life's journey to get one feature done. And I thought, on one hand, I really respect that journey and how much of themselves they gave to that. But on the other hand of it, I just feel in my heart, maybe I'm greedy or selfish a little bit. I read so many books growing up. I feel I have more than one story in me to tell. And so even if I have to go an indie route in the West, and I've had some luck with traditional publishers in China, but in the West, I'm very much still kind of an independent player pushing my own story. The idea that as a novelist, you're kind of the whole ship. You control every word on the page, and then you can bring it. And sure, when you have editors come in and a publisher and an agent, they're going to give their own take on it. But I guess the difference between being a novelist, which you were for the Cloud, and then being maybe a producer on the Cloud's film. Can you talk about that for a minute? Because I feel like the advantage, if you write a show and they screw it up, you wrote a bad show. But if you wrote a novel, even if it got adapted in a lackluster kind of way, you could still say, well, the book was good. I didn't really love what they did with it. The book was good. Maybe they'll do it as a movie again in 10 years. Sometimes they do that. I do feel it's kind of maybe the secret sauce or the way to go. Get your novel done. It's your mark. And whether, whatever happens with the adaptations, you've still got your name on a book. So what's the difference? What's it like being a novelist and then stepping into this whole transmedia world?
Well, the difference is that a novel is intensely personal. I mean, it's like you're a volcano that's erupting and belching forth this hot lava that comes out of the depths of your heart and soul and mind. And it's a very personal kind of experience. And you have total control there. I think what attracts me to producing is basically, Ken Atchity told me, I got 30 writer clients. You're the only one I can say this to. I think you could be a force in film. I think you've got, and that squares with a passion I've had for a number of years. I used to be part of an organization called Artists United, and we were trying to empower 34,000 artists all over the world, artists in every discipline. It fizzled after 3 years because of some internal politics, but I had a passion. I wanted to empower people in the arts. So I'm just going to run with the idea based on Ken's endorsement that I can become a producer. And he is at a certain point going to take me to his team, and I'll do some dry runs for some of the other films in Howard Schuster's. He's got a backlog of 49 other films other than mine. The Cloud will be my first. And Ken's going to let me do some practice pitches. And when he and his team feel like I have it together, they'll let me go out and do pitches for real. And for everyone I bring in, I get a certain percentage of the profits. And that's what an executive producer does. The executive producer is the person who brings money into a project. And that's why at the beginning of every film, you're going to see a long list of names, because each one of those people contributed part of the budget for the film. So I just see it as a natural experience. I'm never going to stop writing novels. I'll never stop writing screenplays, but I'm just going to learn how to be a producer, and Ken is mentoring me into that. So it's a different way of going at storytelling.
That's wonderful. It's a great story, and there's so many things I'm thinking back through the last hour of our conversation I'd love to chat about more. Quickly, I grew up loving games. I was in a gaming club. I was a teenager. I joined the University of Ottawa gaming. I grew up in Ottawa, Canada, a small town, capital of Canada. I was part of the UOGC. I was playing, Dungeons and Dragons and Avatar and Vampire and all these weird. I was a little goth kid. All these fun games with older friends. When I was young, I just always loved stories, whether it was video games, movies, TV shows, novels. I just gobbled them up, and I loved story, and I always kind of felt I wanted to be a storyteller too. But yeah, in my lifetime, I've seen, comics win awards for literature, which was something that wasn't taken seriously a long time ago. Even a couple of the games that I really enjoy. Again, I got a graphics card for my computer recently, so I could play these top AAA games on full quality. And then in the real world, I'm an adult. I rarely find the time, I feel like. But Black Myth Wukong was put up by Game Science. It's their first game. This indie kind of developer out of China took the world by stage. Just crazy sales on Steam, breaking records for most single player adventure game ever sold, and most long-term recurring players and all that. And of course, that's based on one of the 4 great literary classics, Journey to the West and The Monkey King, which is one of the great IPs out of China and an ancient story. But that's a wonderful game, and it kind of shows how you can take a great book and turn it into a really engaging story with cinematic elements. And in between each of, I think, the 7 parts, they've got these great kind of movies done in different styles, like a kind of claymation and stop motion, and all of these great kind of transmedia, like other things than the original story. And another one of my favorite games being a cyberpunk kind of thing, 2077, which is an action FPS, which again, I like kind of getting in my head, and I don't have all the reflexes to play those like some of the kids. But Keanu Reeves, a great Canadian actor, was the kind of the star of that one. And then Idris Elba, who's a great talent, I think he would have made a great Bond, came in for the DLC, the extra journey. And it's really interesting to see these adaptations where you've got these AAA actors playing in video games. So there's a great opportunity for transmedia.
You just have to give yourself permission and allow yourself to go outside the box. If you think I am a novelist, end of story, that's you putting shackles on yourself and closing yourself in. You don't have to do that. You can start out in one medium and you can excel in a different one. You can start out as a graphic novelist and become a print novelist, and also a video game impresario. And one of the things I like about your book is the fact that that you've combined Hemingway with H.P. Lovecraft. That's brilliant. I'm reading your novel and really enjoying it. But you also have these absolutely stunning illustrations throughout the book, and you have music that you can play to accompany yourself as you read it. So I think it's just a matter of, one of the things I'm doing is I'm starting to play with Apple Intelligence. I just bought an iPhone 16 Pro Max, and I'm going to start shooting videos. I've got the little device so you can walk around and shoot yourself. And at a certain point, I'm going to hire a couple of models to portray Mitsuko and Christina and do some short videos with them in character. And there's nothing wrong with spreading your wings and trying different genres and trying even different media. I mean, think of how many actors have their own bands. Plenty.
Yeah, it comes up quite a lot. I think there is something there, right? The thing you keep coming back to that resonates with me is to give yourself permission to be creative, to not confine yourself, not to put boxes around yourself, not to tell yourself no, because so many people in the world will probably do that anyway. You have to believe in yourself. Yeah, with Sun Also Rises on Cthulhu, yeah, that was it's a bit Mad Hatter, and a couple people were really skeptical. I had we had to go through legal because even with public domain being what it is, not everyone was aware of that. And when we put that up on Amazon as a pre-sale, we had our account banned. Amos the Amazing, my other books were taken offline. They were threatening they weren't going to pay any royalties, and that was a headache. I think that was the day after Trump got reelected. The vote was done, and I was kind of numb from some of that stuff. And then I thought, oh, great. Most of my books are off the biggest library in the world now. Like, great. Like, what's going to happen tomorrow? But you got to just, and that could be a life changer. I mean, geez, somebody in a real sensitive state may have done something irreversible, or just taken a real dive. But you got to believe in yourself, I think. And I had passed a letter through a retired entertainment lawyer from Canada stating our case for why The Sun Also Rises on Cthulhu was a good book to be on sale, why it was not infringing on anything, using Pride and Prejudice and Zombies, a book that I had read in college, as a great example, and trying to make the case that unless they're going to pull that bestseller and its Hollywood movie adaptation off the shop, that ours was also good to go, and otherwise they'd have to put out a pretty good argument why one was okay and the other wasn't okay. Mm-hmm. And then of course, yeah, you mentioned the music, 20, 25 years in the dance music in Canada and the States and around the world as a younger person. So I kind of tried to, I quit that because my hearing got pretty bad all those nights, all those concerts, but I wanted to put one last kind of bow on that and tie it together and wrap it up. And there's a bit of surprise. I don't know if you haven't finished the novel. It's a bit fourth wall breaking, and that kind of all ties into it. I want to build a kind of connected universe, a little bit like what you're doing with the Cloud and the Launch. So it's sort of this historical thing, and it will be setting the stage for the next 5 years of my work. But yeah, trying to give the people, your fans and your readers, different things, music, poetry, book.
And another thing is empowering other people in the arts. As I told you, I was a member of on the board of directors of Artists United for 3 years, and that's a serious passion of mine. I really want to empower other artists and give younger artists a hand up, because I know how tough it is, and I know about all the agonies I went through for decades. And for example, collaborating with Christopher Wynn, my creative partner on the video game, I just love seeing his excitement about being able to do something like this, and his opportunity to work with someone of Ken Atchity's caliber, and and also I'm sure I'll be writing screenplays with him eventually, because he's got that kind of mind that can handle that. Mm-hmm. And so my idea is the more I can branch out with my own art, the more I can empower other artists. And that goes far beyond just the actors and actresses that will appear in the film version. It will also be all of the other artists that I work with, because the more if you can really park your ego and just realize that no man is an island, no woman is an island, as John Donne wrote in that great poem. We're all in this together, and great art comes out of great collaboration. And if you're really committed to paying it forward and creating win-win-win-win-win scenarios, you're going to have a very fulfilling life, and you're going to bring a lot of happiness and fulfillment to other people whose lives you touch. So that's my my take on all this.
That's wonderful. It's very inspirational and very aspirational, and I think that's wonderful to be collaborative. Well, we're definitely a little bit over the 1 hour we're going for as a goal. I thought to keep this bite-sized, but it's really, really fascinating. I'd love to do it again with you soon. Let me end with two little questions then. One, if you could give one key piece of advice to aspiring writers, to younger writers, or even at any age that's just hoping to kind of break through with something, what would that be?
Be brutal with yourself and write regularly, daily if you can, because that's what really great writing requires.
Yeah, that resonates with me too. During the COVID thing, I think I published about 500,000 words worth of diaries and stuff, and plus all the editing I do for the newspaper. Like, and Hemingway had cut his teeth on a newspaper too, Kansas City Star, I believe. You just got to get it done, right? Get it done.
Got to get it done.
Yeah.
Writing cannot be theoretical. It's got to be nose to the grindstone, blood, sweat, and tears. You got to get in there and blacken those pages.
Yeah, and not be scared of what comes out of it, right? Because you can always,
Absolutely.
I say, you can always fix a written page. You can't fix a blank page, So you got
a lot of wisdom there, my friend.
Yeah. Okay, one last question then. Where can listeners buy The Cloud, and where can they follow your work? I'm sure a lot of people would be interested to do both of those.
Oh, absolutely. It's available on Amazon, and it's also available online at Barnes & Noble. And if you want to learn more about it before you commit to buying it either as a print book or Kindle, go to www.thecloudnovel.com. And you can read 4 sample chapters. And then there's a link to Amazon. But it's available. Yeah.
Thecloudnovel.com, is that?
Thecloudnovel.com.
Perfect. Really, really good. Now, one thing interesting, what is the most interesting audiobook I've heard in the last year was, again, my buddy Robert J. Sawyer's The Downloaded, who got a lot of great Canadian talent. Brendan Fraser, who just won his Academy Award for The Whale. He was the main driver for that, Colm Fiore. And actually, they got in touch with Audible, and it was kind of almost like a radio play. And they had the exclusive audiobook out, I think 6 months before the paperback came out. So with all your Hollywood connections, and I don't know if that might happen before or after the movie, but I think The Cloud would be a great option for some kind of whether a radio play, or I think that would be a great audio book too, something to look at along the way. Another great way to consume a great.
I'm totally open to that. I've spoken to Ken several times about various things in that genre, and he's totally open to it because he's truly a Renaissance man. But he says, "Yeah, let's get the film out. Let's focus on the film."
If anyone from Audible is listening, there's a good tip for you right there.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you, my good friend Robert Rivenbark. I look forward to doing this again very soon.
Okay, thank you so much for having me.
Yes, my pleasure.
Take care.
Bye.